Second.
Okay. First item on the agenda, work study, item number 1, update on Measure U plan. Chiefs?
So while the chief is making his way up to the podium, I just wanted to start by saying that on Thursday evening, a bulk of the council members and I had the honor and privilege of attending the local law enforcement awards, where we had a couple officers that were actually that received some recognition. And so I think in terms of what our officers and firefighters do day in and day out, it's pretty remarkable and commendable what we've been able to do over the course of the last few years, especially as it relates to Measure U. And so both chiefs will provide some information as it relates to some of the positive outcomes as a result of what they've been leading the departments through. And so I know that they've got quite a number of good things to report as a result of that. So with that being said, Mayor.
Thank you, Chris, for that. And
Mayor, members of the council, and our interim city manager, Mr. Lopez, I'd like to just take a moment again and thank Chris for his support. Over the last couple of weeks, we've had a series of very robust discussions. Both your police and fire chief are involved and working with our city leadership to continue our efforts to move our city forward. So I felt that was important to share with you. I thank you for that, Chris. Appreciate it. I would like to kind of queue up our reports today on a broader sense. Realized Council Member Percival had asked for an update, as well as Council Member Meyer, and I wanted to make it a little bit more robust and give a little bit of a very brief history on how we ended up here, because I think that's important towards many of the important discussions that are ongoing. On the fire side, there were really 3 studies that were central to the evolution and development of our 10-year plan. And you've heard that term, the 10-year plan, is a living, breathing document referred to oftentimes as the spending plan, the action plan, is part of the Measure U public safety tax. The respective findings of these reports served as important benchmarks for very intense community-based discussions regarding fire EMS services in the city, but most importantly provided the necessary foundation for related public policy made by the City Council, vested with that responsibility in support of the tax measure implementation. So I think it's important for residents to know that the information that we're presenting is part of a bigger, larger plan that's been ongoing. Those 3 reports I referenced are the state audit, the state auditor's findings that reviewed the fire department functions, indicating that the fire department was critically underfunded. The deployment analysis that was completed in 2016, the deployment analysis also followed shortly thereafter, was completed and presented to the City Council in 2015. And that really took a really deep dive into the operational administrative issues of our department and provided key findings and recommendations. And finally, the standards of coverage, which I know everyone here had an opportunity to review, which included a community risk assessment report in 2017. This built on the previous studies. It built on the recommendations from the auditor's findings. And as I will share with you here shortly, I'm pleased to report that significant progress has been made in all operational administrative recommendations as highlighted as part of these report findings. Centered to this is our commitment of our management team to continue to focus on the 3 things I've shared with you: firefighter safety, operational readiness, and fiscal sustainability. And with that, Sarah is going to hand out, you already have in front of you basically what I'm presenting, you have in front of you, the first being the PowerPoint. And the look and the feel and the message is the same. So this is the same message that builds upon what we started in the very beginning of our discussions with regard to Measure U. Our citizens and business groups identified fire suppression and advanced life support as the highest priority for our Hemet Fire Department. We're placing continued emphasis of setting the foundation for our emergency services improvements. Our budgetary focus will continue to place emphasis on addressing the key operational needs, administrative and department structure, all of which I kind of referenced previously from all the reports and research that we've done. Our spending plan is and will be fiscally responsible. The outcomes will be measured, and those outcomes reported to the Measure U Committee, our City Council, and our community. Again, as I mentioned, the key fiscal policy strategies are going to be based on these three principles of firefighter safety. I want to thank you, the council, because you have stepped up during some very challenging times to help us address some immediate need issues dealing with radio systems, portable radios, personal protective equipment, and a whole host of other related fire equipment that you all are very aware we've been working hard to upgrade and bring to current standard. Our operational readiness to make sure that when we're called upon, we're ready to go. And again, fiscal responsibility or sustainability. And we're going to measure all those outcomes with data, process improvement, and we're going to share with you tonight some of those outcomes. And before the police chief gets to it, I wasn't able to make the font bigger. So I apologize to that, police chief. I know. Well, so in front of you, yeah, I provided a hard copy of the PowerPoint. So doing a tap dance here. But again, our key fiscal strategies are ongoing. So they're not just for this budget year, but as we prepare in concert with our leadership team for this fiscal year, we're looking to carry over all our baseline operational administrative Measure U funded portions that are authorized and approved in this current fiscal year. Our aggressive recruitment plan is ongoing, and to Councilmember Percival's correct point of reminding us on a regular basis that we need to continue that effort, we're doing that. We have actually a very aggressive firefighter paramedic recruitment underway right now to fill 5 openings. We have one candidate that has completed the background going on to the next phase. We anticipate we'll board him sometime mid-May, training, have him ready to go and in the field assigned to a position in September. We also, concurrent with that, have another recruitment that's closing. We have 25 candidates on that list right now, and we're in the process of vetting those. So we hope to fill the balance of those openings with those recruits. We're not stopping in doing it the same way just because that's how we've always done it. So one of the new changes that we'll be implementing with the next recruitment cycle is that we're joining a statewide training consortium. So we'll have access to a statewide database for testing, for recruit list, and it really will broaden our footprint in terms of availability of candidates. That is really the industry standard, and it'll provide us a lot more flexibility, but more importantly, expose HEMT to a broader audience, and that's what we hope to accomplish through that change. Our internal, external recruitments are planned for engineer in the rank of fire captain. We've had 2 retirements this past year. We anticipate another 2 this year. We're starting to see a significant turnover on our senior leadership and mid-level positions. Why that's important? Because, well, twofold. I look at it 2 ways. We're losing extensive industrial knowledge, experience that really has benefited our fire department. But the positive is that, as you know, PERS costs continue to be one of those issues that we're all struggling with, every agency. So right now, out of our force structure of a little over 50, 24 are currently the new classic PEPRA rate. So our new employees that we're hiring that are coming in at the entry level are paying the maximum rate on their retirement contribution. I share that with you because I know that's at the forefront of what your concerns. I share the same, and we're looking at that. That's not going to happen overnight. But we're seeing that movement. So that's going to take some time to accomplish, but that is underway right now. What I really want to take a minute just to focus on are the key operational administrative enhancements and outcomes that have been completed. You approved 6 firefighter paramedics that were funded in this fiscal year. Medic 1 has been placed in service as of October 1, 2018. Our peak demand part-time unit was established actually prior to Medic 1, but in working closely with HFFA, we're right now still in the midst of staffing the firefighter medic rank. We're in the process of upfitting that with new equipment, and we'll be reintroducing that peak demand unit in addition to Medic 1 here in the near term. We've hired 2 dispatchers. It's important to understand that when we started the journey with Measure E and Measure U, I can't believe time flies like that, but fire department traditionally had no fiscal skin in the game, if you will. We share a dispatch center, however, we did not have any budget control over positions, over structure, etc. So an effort led by the previous police chief and certainly bolstered by our current police chief, Rob Webb. I was going to say Rob Brown. He would get upset with that. We have taken on part of that in introducing funding for dispatchers, call takers, and we are looking at sharing our cost apportionment for the radio system that you're going to hear more. That's a critical item that we need to replace. We've hired 2 dispatchers. Emergency medical dispatch training is underway. We've had to delay that. I think I gave we're going to land on the moon January 2019 speech. We've had to delay that, and the reason for that has been we've lost some dispatchers. And so dispatchers are critical, are the tip of the spear for this particular effort. We have assurances based on our looking at where we're going that we're going to bump it out to the 1st of 2020, first quarter, and we'll be able to implement that. We have till June of 2020. It's a mandate that all PSAP, public safety answering points, dispatch centers need to have the CMD. We're well underway. We just had a slight pause because of that logistics. We've hired 3 fire captains. We fully staffed Engine 5. I've had some very positive inputs from our residents in East Hemet, and we've had a number of very significant calls where that engine has made an absolute difference. So once again, I thank you for supporting that. We have a part-time office specialist that's assigned to our cost recovery program. Jerry Whitmore, if you have not had a chance to meet her, is also responsible for our internal newsletter. She's done a fantastic job of working with our contractor of bolstering our cost recovery. And that's an area that's ongoing, but again, I want to thank you for that acknowledgement that we needed additional help with that effort. We've increased we have 2 outsourced contracts that we have. Now, one is for fire prevention. We contract with CSG for life safety inspections, plant check activities. We have a very close working interface with planning and development. We've increased that time from 2 days a week to 4 days a week, and we refined it even further, so it's demand driven. So when a business calls and they need a certificate of occupancy or a final inspection, then we address that on a demand basis, and we've had really good feedback, very pleased. I'll share one good example of that very briefly. Is currently we're working with a business, an AutoZone, that's attempting to open in our city. And they've had a number of delays in the planning construction. Our CSG inspector went, and we've been working, and I've authorized a workaround so they can start stocking and they can get into business earlier. We have full support from our building officials, Sarah Rettmeyer, but that's a collective effort with the focus keeping them safe, but getting them on track so they can get in business quickly. I was really pleased to hear that. That occurred over the weekend. Increased contract service for emergency medical paramedic coordinator from 32 hours to 96 hours, which equates to about 4 days a week, sometimes 3. We've had a change I think everybody has met Art Durbin, previously Art. We now have Melissa Schmidt, and Melissa joined us from Mercier. She has over 25 years of critical care nursing experience, nurse professional, and she is helping immensely with developing our quality assurance to make our paramedics better. And we're working closely with HFFA and underlying the importance of why, for us, that's important. Hemet is not an afterthought. We want to provide the best care possible and want to have the highest trained paramedics. And to do that, we got to invest back into them. But this is we're seeing real good return on our investment with that. And then convert the emergency services coordinator, Kat Henderson, from part-time to full-time. And we have a Measure U offset that's allowed us to do that. For everyone in the room, you're very well aware of what that has done in helping us with CERT and our volunteers and other disaster preparedness activities. Oh, locked up. This is why I brought this copies. Watch me tap dance. So if you go to the next page, I want to just, on your PowerPoint, your hard copy, and thank you, the police chief saved me. I don't, thank you, Rob. Appreciate it. I love that guy. So these are I'm excited about what we're reporting out and all the efforts that our team has accomplished, but we still got a lot of work to do. So this represents the list, and this list is refined daily. This list is part of our spending plan. So when I refer to our spending staffing plan, this is a living, breathing document. What I've included, this spending plan, you'll see at the third page, is actually the first year. And actually, Chris pointed this out in one of our discussions. We need to compare and contrast. To me, it's seamless because every time I come back, I make mention of it, but I wanted to show you. So you have in front of you at third page in is the first year. If you compare that to what we got accomplished in 17-18, there's some changes. One of the biggest changes that you'll note is that we originally had plans to staff the truck company. And of all the operational objectives that we've accomplished, that's the one last operational objective that has been deferred each of the fiscal years since the implementation of Measure U. And it's fiscal. And so we have to look at the cost. We have to look at not only the current, what we have to do that, but then we have to look and work closely with finance on the ongoing long-term impacts. That decision, I made that based on input from our finance department, discussions with our city manager, and more importantly, consensus from our labor group. HFFA, again, has been an active part of this discussion. I've kept them briefed. They're part of our command staff meetings that we have every 2 weeks. And we're having those frank discussions, not to seek permission, but to have clear transparency in terms of the discussion, why the decisions are made. So the bottom line is we still need a truck. But if you look at the list that you have on your key strategic needs, you're going to hear more on the public safety communication joint law fire. We need to replace our radio system, replacement of our CAD system. We have EMD, public safety operator and call takers. Our vehicle replacement needs, we're fortunate, I shared with you previously, we were able to purchase 2 new engines, but we need 4 brand new engines now. Our highest mileage is approaching 180,000 miles, and then the next one's about 165,000, and they're past the 10-year mark. So we have a very robust vehicle apparatus replacement plan. We're looking at some innovation in terms of how we might purchase those large outlays in out years. But what I'm hoping to do this year is to work with our leadership team to at least address the purchase of 1 engine. But those are discussions that are ongoing. The squads are mentioned here. You have approved for the purchase of 4 light rescue vehicles, 2 of which were funded through the general fund and 2 of which were funded through Measure U. Those vehicles are going to replace the squads. And I want to give credit again to our apparatus committee who came to me. We wanted to spec the squad, and they said, we're paying way too much for this. We can get 4 of this for 1 of that. And so you can't argue with that. So they came back with a plan that we presented, and that purchase is in process. We hope to see those vehicles in the next couple months. But again, that's involving our team and getting the input and moving forward what I think was a good business decision to change the platform. Our truck company, back to the truck, We have now a TDA, which is a hook and ladder. It does not have a pump. So I've tasked the committee to looking at our existing truck company, and is that the most appropriate vehicle? Are there other options that we can look at as part of a broader discussion on how we address our truck needs? Because we do have a need for our elevated platform. But that process is well underway. I included the Type 6, I've mentioned this before, which is a light vehicle with a small pump. We've applied with the Office of Emergency Services. And like our lime green engine that we have now, we participate in that program. That would be the same concept. State provides that to the city. We agree to staff it and respond not only for local needs, but for out-of-county needs as needed. That's the trend that we're looking at. Equipment needs. Self-contained breathing apparatus. I want to thank you once again. You came to our rescue with approving funding for a replacement of a compressor that was outdated, that needed to be replaced and was broken. And we needed to replace bottles and masks that were outdated. You provided me that seed money to at least get 40 bottles and replace that compressor. The bigger picture is every harness that the bottles are held into and the monitoring devices that are part of that are all out of compliance and need to be replaced. We have a grant, and I'm smiling when I look at our mayor. We have a grant in play with AFG. We are hoping to hear shortly on, we applied for a $500,000 grant which will outfit and replace all those breathing apparatus and the harnesses with new bottles, new harnesses, and everything will be updated. But the caution with that, we have to have a plan B, so that's part of my job on your behalf is to make sure we have those options available. I'm hoping, and Kat will attest to this, I'm on the phone with Kat every morning. Did we hear from AFG yet? And nothing yet, but we're hoping for good news. Deferred maintenance, we're looking at least contributing towards helping address this. This is a significant issue. We've got about $600,000+ of itemized deferred maintenance for our fire facilities. We've chipped away at a little bit of it, but we do have a significant backlog, as the city does citywide. So we're looking at trying to come up with a way that we can help offset some of those general fund costs to address at least a portion of that. So that would be important. We had a kitchen remodel for Station 1 and one for Station 2. Rob just texted me and said, you would be wise not to say anything. Just stay there, okay? Which I will. Anyway, so the deferred maintenance is continuing to be a significant challenge. In our future station facilities, again, we're fast approaching, as identified in our deployment analysis, we're going to need to address the uptick in development at McSweeney. We've probably got about a 1 to 2 year window to start having some serious discussions. As you know, we have some money set aside for a future facility that's been earmarked for a number of years now. And in West Hemet, and that's about a 5-year arc, with the West annexation that we're talking, that we spoke to. What did you do, Rob, on this? What was the key?
The little button that goes like this. The arrow on top.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. He's going to fix it. All right. Anyway, closing this out, implementation of the Hemet Fire Department Measure U action plan will continue to focus on our response that's measured, response that's sufficient, and response that's reliable now and well into the future. The other documents that you have that I've included in the packet are the spending plan, staffing plan. On the second page of the staffing plan, basically take what we saw as our strategic needs in years 3 and 4, 2019 and 2020 are just, they're placeholders. So they're part of a broader discussion that we're having right now and looking at how we can accomplish some or all of that. And that's in process right now. In addition to that, I have included a synopsis of our critical needs, infrastructure and otherwise, so that's basically the laundry list. And then one final doc. So the last document is an org chart, and I wanted to provide this to you to put in the context what this all comes down to. It comes down to people, personnel, and the equipment. All 5 of your fire stations now are fully staffed. They're fully staffed with captain, engineer, and firefighter medic. So if you look at the chart I gave you, if you look at Station 1, it reflects Engine 1 staffing. We have an A and B and C shift, and then we also have at Station 1 Medic 1. Everything that's depicted in yellow is Measure U funded positions as marked. I've also included in the center the proposed strategic needs, just to recap. In the upper left-hand corner, we have an authorized sworn strength of 55. That includes the 1 fire chief, 3 battalion chiefs. Presently, we have 15 captains with 1 vacancy. We have 15 engineers budgeted with 2 vacancies. Those were due to retirements. And we have 21 firefighter paramedics, and 5 of those are vacant. Authorized non-sworn, non-safety, we have 2 full-time personnel, and then 1 part-time, and then 2 contract, as I shared with you. So the org chart gives you that breakdown on organizationally how we're staffed. And with that, I'll be open for any questions.
Any questions from council?
I do have, first a comment. Thank you for the update. And thank you for identifying stuff that hasn't been implemented in the original plan for year 1 and 2, and how we've moved and kind of reorganized moving forward what that plan is going to look like. Because I do know that, and you've mentioned it several times, that the communication system is a crucial part of this that needs to be addressed in the very short term. So thanks for looking at that and identifying moving forward and making those fine-tune adjustments as we move. Because you've mentioned too that this is a living, breathing document. So I think that some of the plan up in the very front was very aggressive, and we've now seen realistically where that has played out and how we're going to see it moving forward. So thanks on that. Do you have an estimate on filling these vacancies with the retirements, upcoming retirements, and promotions and all that?
Well, as I alluded to, on the firefighter paramedic, we have 2 active recruitments underway right now. The time lag is the time lag. Once they get through the initial gauntlet, if you will, then we have the background and all the other city requirements. The consortium that we're joining is going to greatly streamline that process up front. Our organizational priority is to fill those vacancies as quickly as possible, and we're working at doing that as quickly as we can do that. And I think there's some opportunities in the mid to long term to really address our recruitment process. We've made that first step with joining the consortium, but I'd like to see, and we're having these discussions right now, of what an entry-level firefighter, what are those opportunities? Should they come in as a paramedic? Can we sponsor them to go to the fire academy? Those are discussions that we're having. They're strategic right now, but the focus is to get these positions filled. I'm hoping by, and I know you're good at pinning me down on dates. If I tell you October and we come in at November, I don't want you mad at me, but we're working very, very hard to get this done. That's a priority.
And thanks for bringing up how you're looking at moving forward. Are we hiring firefighters? Are we looking at just paramedics? I think that something that might be good, because cost is everything, and we all know labor is the biggest chunk. Are we looking at, with the squads, having a firefighter, paramedic, and maybe a firefighter EMT, so that we can get people in and maybe have opportunity to bring people in at a lower rate, and then give them incentives to be able to stay with us long term. Because if we're going to invest a lot of money into people, we can get a commitment from them, and they are able to move up, become a paramedic with incentive and saving money in the long term.
So the short answer to that is yes, and I will commit to the council that this is a broader discussion that we're having with HFFA long term to look at how we might come together on what is the ideal candidate. There needs to be, we need to somehow do this different. I'm not getting the numbers that we typically get in a firefighter recruitment. I think the police chief is going to probably talk a little bit about that, but in general, the workforce is changing.
Sure.
So how we message, how we recruit, what we do, and how we do it needs to be reviewed. But the short answer, yeah, that will be one of the discussions we have in the near term.
Very good. Thank you.
I do want to just point to one final document, and want to give credit to HFFA. They had a Measure U update newsletter that's been produced, and I want to acknowledge that effort. Thank you for that. And with that, I've concluded. Yes.
Yes?
Yeah, Chief, a couple questions. One kind of a dovetail on Michael's question about the recruitment. So obviously you have vacancies and that recruitment's underway to fill at that level. You mentioned in your presentation that you're anticipating a couple more retirements. So simultaneous to doing the entry-level recruitment, are you also gearing up and looking to create an eligibility list for promotions? If you have some window of time that you're anticipating those higher-ranking individuals to retire,
right,
are you looking at creating an eligibility list so that when that happens, that vacancy, you've already got a list ready to go?
And I'm smiling when I answer this question, so absolutely. The short answer, yes. I've assigned that task to our Battalion Chief, Jamie Myshak, who's responsible for the engineer promotional, and then the other parts of the team are going to be working on the captain's promotional. The key for that is there's a cost impact for doing the recruitment and doing the promotional. I need to make sure that there's in fact an opening going to become available before we initiate that. So it's a bit of a dance. It's timing and sequence. We rely heavily on the input from the employee. That's one of the reasons I know finance asked the department heads, can you assess what your projected retirement needs are? And we do that. So short version is we're preparing for engineer's test and a captain's test with the intent of establishing a list for both those positions for filling in third, fourth quarter of this year into next year.
Thank you for that. Question on the emergency services coordinator position, 50% Measure U, 50% general fund. What was the rationale for splitting that?
Well, it was a part-time position. So it was the city made the decision during the economic downturn to down-queue that from a full-time to a part-time position. When we came in, we looked at and assessed the need, and we definitely more than had a need for a full-time designation. The key was there are no general fund monies available to do that. So we applied the Measure U funding for that offset to allow us to do that.
So are we looking at making that 100% Measure U at some point in the future?
Not with that particular position. We're in discussions with some other possibilities in terms of moving I call it the Ouija board around to help that discussion. But it more than likely, and I'm looking to Chris, will probably be on the safety side, not the non-safety. And that's a discussion we have ongoing right now.
Okay. And just a brief comment too. I was able to observe this year's exercise, a full-scale exercise at the hospital. And I just want to say that it's that kind of stuff that is so critical involving the allied agencies that in a major incident are going to have to come together. So those kinds of exercises are huge in helping our city prepare, along with the other allied agencies prepare for the eventual catastrophic event that's coming. So you got two different kinds of exercises that have happened, and I anticipate that third one's going to be equally challenging. So I want to thank all of your staff for participating in that and setting it up and executing it.
Thank you.
Carly, do you have any questions, comments?
Thank you for doing this. I know it was a lot of work, and we appreciate it, and I think that the public appreciates to see where the money's going.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
So some of my questions have already been answered, but I like where Michael was going with the firefighter in training being much like, PD uses CSOs to kind of offset their budget or their budget costs. So I really like the idea Michael brought up about the ones in training to be a part of the team and certainly feel that need. And also, have we had any difficulties, like PD, for example, with the recruitment and how difficult it is to get somebody all the way through the training, and then all of a sudden, it doesn't pan out? And so have you experienced a number of those recruits in that regard?
We have, and I will just, the short answer to that is we have high standards here at the Hemet Fire Department. We make every effort through our training cadre to meet best practices that meet not only state but national standards. That's been a commitment that I make to you when you brought me on board, and our team's working really hard with that. And unfortunately, sometimes people just don't meet that need. However, that being said, on the HR side, we need to make sure that we have a training system that's fair, it's consistent, and that can be defendable. So that's the balance we have to make. But it is a challenge, and I kind of briefly mentioned the millennial. It's just looking at everything different, and we're committed to doing that.
And I know it's not just us. Everybody goes through the same thing. But anyway, thanks for all that your team is doing, and certainly for this report.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That one in the first.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Council. First, I'd like to start off with saying thank you so much for attending the LEAC Awards. Those of you that could make it this last week. It's always a really good event, good time to network with the other agencies and all the politicians that are there. It's a really, really sharp event.
It's too bad they don't coordinate those events, though.
Well, I was at CPRA, which was in Buena Park, at one of our events that was honoring some of our dispatchers that did a great job. So I've been promised next year that those events will not be on the same day. So it was interesting because I've never attended CPRA, but being in a banquet room full of dispatchers was interesting to say the least. So it was good to have them all honored though. Excuse me. I just want to let you know that I have given you 3 different documents. One's a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. The other one is just a snapshot of our updated proposed police staffing plan for Measure U. And then the one that's the yellow and green is something that I'm going to start giving out. Measure U committee will also see this, but it is our sworn and non-sworn positions, and it breaks it down by color to show you who is funded out of Measure U and who is funded out of the general fund. So that's a little bit easier to try to see instead of some of the other things that we've been handing out at other speaking engagements and presentations. So hopefully that's helpful for you. So I'm going to try to buzz through this real quick since Scott gave me 3 minutes to finish up. But first we're going to talk about a progress report, some real quick crime stats, and then a quick budget update. Just kidding.
Thanks, Chief. But he didn't give us a binder.
Yeah. So overall, since the implementation of Measure U, we've actually been able to bring on and hire 30 police officers to the table of organization. Bad news is that as a net gain, we have 6. So, and that's including all kinds of different things. That's including people not being able to make it through the academy, people bumping out of our training program. We recently had a detective that left. He got hired as a assistant sheriff at a place in Colorado. His buddy was elected sheriff, so he couldn't pass that opportunity up. So we've had some things that have occurred that I think are natural, but we are finding success in hiring folks. We're just having a hard time maintaining them. We've also had some retirements in play, so we're working hard to do that. Right now, we currently have 5 laterals from organizations in our background process. I spoke about the ones that we lost. We have 2 CSOs. We lost one, not because of anything that was going on. That's because her and her husband decided to move to Tennessee. So that's just the way it is. We've been able to hire 4 dispatchers. One of our real great additions to our team is a civilian dispatch / record supervisor. So we now have a civilian that's in charge of those 2 areas. Before we had our sworn person doing that. So once again, we're trying to alleviate costs by bringing in a non-sworn person to do that. We hired that person from RSO. It was interesting because when I was at the CPRA Awards, RSO gave him an award from when he worked there with them, but he was at our table. So good steal on our part. As many of you know, we pay for half of 2 of our maintenance workers out at the corporation yard. They basically team up with our ROX officers and haul in tons and tons of homeless encampment stuff, property, trash, all kinds of stuff. So they're a very important part of our team. So as of right now, to date, we have 71 sworn on, and we're authorized for 90. This is in your packet. You guys can take a look at this whenever you want. It's just a snapshot of where we're at in Measure U. This is one of the budgets that we try to track very robustly. My staff all make sure that they control our costs. Our department, we have what's called an internal requisition form. Every purchase over $50 has to be approved. They sign a form, give us justification, and run up the chain. So we try to make sure that we are always very good stewards of the public dollar. I want to talk real quickly about crime stats. As many of you know, I'm not like a crime stat guru guy. I think they kind of are what they are. Many people are infatuated. The press often is infatuated with crime statistics for some reason. I can tell you that I think if you're looking at crime statistics in a 1-year or 2-year spread, you're probably not doing it right. I think when you look at crime statistics, you need to look at it kind of like the stock market, mutual funds over a long period of time. Otherwise, you're not able to pick up any trends, what may be happening, what may not be happening. But bottom line is that last year, in 2018, we had a reduction of 7% across the board. Total crimes dropped. Some of them are concerning for me. Of course, rape went up 8%, robbery went up 8%. Homicide actually went up 100%. But we had 4 the year before, so of course when you have small numbers and you have a few different incidents, that can really change quickly. We had 2 incidents that were homicide-suicide, so that bumped us up very higher. And we had 1 episode that was from the year prior that was recategorized as a homicide, so that's one of the reasons you see an increase there. But bottom line is, I think our folks did a pretty good job, if that's what you're looking at for crime statistics. Burglary was down 19%, which is good. Larceny, 7%. We wrote 67% more citations, but the number of crimes was down about 7%. So overall, I'm happy with it. If I was a real crime statistic guy, I'd be celebrating it. But then again, if it goes up next year, then I'm the guy to blame, right? So back to hiring and retention. This is one of the statistics that really grabs my attention. This is Officer Preston. He is absolutely one of our best officers. This was after he was involved in about a 6-minute fight with a kidnapping suspect. When officer assaults in the city of Hemet are up 82%, unacceptable to me. So I think that is one of the issues that we see every day, that we have a problem with the recruiting because of things like this happen. And I don't know what it is, but I can tell you that I think across the nation that a lot of people don't have a problem and think it's just part of our job to go out and do things like this. In this picture, he has a broken arm and a broken hand. We lost him for about 4 months when he had his hand surgically repaired. He's back working now, but as you can imagine, he's a little bit disheveled, a little bit tired, and this is the stuff that keeps me up at night right here. Our people shouldn't have to be going through that. They never signed up for that. They don't get paid enough for that. I don't know if anyone can get paid enough for that. But just, this is one of the things that we're really challenged with on a day-to-day basis. So our 911 call center that we partner with the fire department with, amazing job they do in there. I think we were recently audited, and the auditor was astonished that they are answering 99.09% 911 calls within 15 seconds. It was the highest rated dispatch center in our area. So they really commented on that. So, but they do a really good job, and if any of you have ever been in our dispatch center, it is go, 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 100% all the time. And I don't know how they do their job, because it's one of the most difficult jobs, I think, that are out there. So taking this into perspective, really, what does this all mean when we're talking about Measure U, right? So these things that I'm going to talk about right now would absolutely not exist if we did not have Measure U. So this is our ROCKS team. These guys are one of the hardest working teams in the Valley. They go out there every day. They start very early in the morning. They finish very late at night. Their 2018 statistics where they arrested over 1,000 people. They handled 5 marijuana grows. They seized $17,000. But one thing in the police department that I don't think a lot of departments do is that one of our goals for our ROCKS team is to get the people off the street that want the help. So they were able to actually rehome 9 people last year that they had contact with, or that we had contact with from another community group that said, hey, can you guys help these folks? So they have built really good working relationships with other agencies in the Valley, with Valley Restart and United Way. So we'll work together to try to get someone a ticket home. Oftentimes we won't just put them on a bus. We'll make sure that they have a relative or a job waiting for them right now. We are currently working with another family that we're trying to get back to Colorado, and we're hopeful that that will happen this week. But, you know, when I first started law enforcement, that's not something that law enforcement did. Homeless stuff, you know. We arrested them if they weren't behaving properly. But now we're very engaged with the homeless. And, you know, part of the instruction that I have given to all of our people is if someone wants help, let's get them off the street. If they're going to, you know, not behave, if they're going to violate the law, then we'll take appropriate action. But we always ask first, hey, can we get you off the street? Do you want help? Crime Suppression Unit, also another busy group. They started later in the year, so they didn't have a full year in. Over 105 arrests, 10 search warrants they served, 676 pounds of drugs. These guys are the ones that are working the street-level drugs. We don't have a task force specifically in this valley that works street-level drugs, so they're it. They also work prostitution cases. They work a lot with our Riverside County Human Trafficking Unit, and they also assist other agencies that come in from our and need help. FBI will say, hey, can you guys set up a surveillance over here? They're the ones that generally we call and do short things like assist other agencies. I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention other task force operations that we have in this valley. I don't know if everyone's familiar with that, but we are very lucky to have so many task forces working here. The force multiplier that we get is phenomenal. So we have our Cannabis Regulation Task Force. Not to pick on the city attorney, but I think we've done a pretty good job trying to scale back, the cost and handle cannabis regulations through the criminal aspect rather than the civil aspect. It's much quicker. Sometimes the civil aspect is very, very frustrating, takes a long time. So we're able to speed that process up with our task force operation. We have a gang task force that's right here, Region 3 for the Riverside County Gang Task Force. They're one of the busiest task force in the county. Then we have our GET team, which is our gang impact team, which is run by the DA's office, but we're lucky to house that team. It's federal, state, and local agents. Very impressive, high-level police work, a lot of wiretaps, things like that, surveillances. They work with a lot of the prison gangs, so they've been very successful in our town. I'll show you some of that later. And then, of course, our PAC team who handles all the AB 109ers that were released, compliments of the governor a few years ago, and they're the ones that actually track them in our communities. So back to the Gang Impact Team, just a quick snapshot for them. They have only been in existence for about 15 months now, maybe, and 16 months, 177 total arrests. It's phenomenal. The great thing about that team is everyone is cross-sworn, so they're all federal agents also, so we can file cases in federal court. 30 pending arrests, but the impressive thing there is 139 guns have been recovered. So that's a big deal for us. And one of the things that we don't hear about and talk very often about is our crisis intervention team. And this is a great partnership that we formed with County Mental Health. We actually have an officer that rides around with one of their clinicians. And what they do is any type of mental health call, they come in and they try to handle the initial call. If they're unavailable, our officers will get them that information and they'll do the follow-up. So the good stuff is that they will be able to go do the casework afterwards that generally our officers aren't able to handle. So we've noticed that basically our calls for service have gone down 1,888 for just general calls for service for our officers. And then incidents that we've actually had to put handcuffs on people and take them into custody have gone down 669 calls. It's tremendous because those mental health calls take a long time, and if we can't have AMR transport them, our officers have to transport them to Riverside for assistance. So this is a big time saver, real winner for us. Ongoing challenges, I'll just touch briefly on these. You guys know Prop 47 and 57 has absolutely killed the state with some of the people that are out and about and lowering the penalties and the ramifications of some of the things that they do. AB 109, which some people are still voting is a success. I just looked last week, and out of about the 1,600 people in our county that are on AB 109, 769 of them have warrants. So that tells you how successful that is. Of course, we always have our unfunded mandates budget, and then our hiring and retention is always very challenging for us. I just recently read in the American Government magazine, and this is a crisis across the United States for hiring and retaining police officers. They said that 63% of all government agencies are reporting that the highest and most difficult person to hire right now is a police officer. So it's being felt across the nation. One of the things that I think we're really trying hard to do, and I told my guys to stop using my glamour shot, but so we're not going to do that any longer. But one of the things that we've worked hard to do is public outreach. We want to make sure that the public understands what's going on. We have a really high presence on social media. We try to respond back to folks on social media. We just rolled out our app, which is a pretty cool little app that hopefully is going to help out our citizens. We also have an internal side to that app that we believe our officers are going to actually be able to write reports on and things like that, so that should be helpful. And then, of course, we're sending out our Measure U newsletters now. We're going to try to do that each month. So every time I give this presentation, everyone normally says, well, what can we do? So some of the things that I think that we can do as a community is develop a little bit of plan for stability. We need to focus on removing the sunset clause off of the measure. We are surrounded by agencies that have the same type of sales tax, and they do not have a sunset clause. It adds stability to their organizations. Our people know it. The citizens know it. Probably the bad guys know it. So we need to make sure that we re-up this thing and keep this going in perpetuity. My suggestion would be that we do it in a good economy and not wait for a downturn, and that we do it early and not wait for the 7th or 8th year and then run into problems. Also, one of the things that we're really trying to do is rebrand and be a positive force. I won't go through those little issues there, but we're really trying to be policing in a positive manner. Sometimes it's really difficult. Some of the things we do is not so positive, but we really try to have a positive aspect about what we're doing in our work every day. So that's kind of where we're at. I'll be glad to take a few questions if you want, whatever I can do.
Council have questions for the Chief?
Thanks, Chief.
You're welcome.
I appreciate all the effort you put into this. One of the things that I think it's going to be very important moving forward is you had mentioned that we're at a net 6 gain because of people retiring, people not making cut. What are we going to do different moving forward? Because Menifee just hired a new police chief, so they're going to be filling the ranks of their entire police department. Riverside, City of Riverside has a tax measure just like you mentioned. They're hiring cops. The sheriff's department's hiring cops. What are we going to do different to make us stand out, to make people want to come here, so that we can get to these goals?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Everybody's hiring. I can tell you a few years ago, I would look in the PORAC News, which is it's a news magazine that goes out to every police officer in the state. There was generally a half a page of ads on who was hiring. Now it's like an entire 6 pages in the back. So everybody's hiring. So a couple of things that we've done is we're reaching out to some social media specialists. We're going to start doing things like geofencing areas. So, I'm not going to go into specific areas that we're going to geofence, but we're going to be targeting specific people that we know are interested in law enforcement. One of our real challenges is that we're not seeing a big influx from the military any longer. We just don't get applicants from the military, and it's not just us, it's everybody. So that's a challenge, because that kind of fit the mold of a police officer, and we've always had success with that. So I have a proposal on my desk from one of our sergeants that after we start the entry-level process for someone that has never been to the academy, that we actually hold sort of an internal 3-week preparation class to help with the success rate to get them through that academy. So we have a couple creative things going on. We're going to be using some digital marketing that Measure U is going to be helping us pay for, to try to reach out to some of those folks that we think we're missing. So we have some creative things in the mix, but it's still going to be challenging. You have a certain person to work here at Hemet PD. You have to be have a certain mentality and work ethic. I can tell you that we are probably one of the hardest working PDs around. I have no problem saying that. I would say that in front of my peers. So you have to be able to want to work here.
The other thing I wanted to add to that is item number 1 really becomes very important to that too, because when you talk about stability, when you talk about an outside, maybe a lateral police officer that wants to come to the city of Hemet, they're going to look for that stability in terms of what that all means for them. And so when we're trying to attract and pull these officers from other agencies, in my view, the stability that gets set as a result of making sure that that is continuing on, I think is a big component to help draw people from other agencies and come to us. Is for the members of the council that were there on Thursday evening, you really get a glimpse into the challenges that go on day in and day out for these officers. And so when we talk about the stability that we need to bring on and retain our officers, I think that's a really crucial part of that.
And I think, and I've had a conversation with Chris about some other creative ideas that we might be able to implement from a policy standpoint, that might be able to be implemented to help attract and retain more officers. But number 1 is something that we're definitely going to have to look at. And I understand, if you go back to that slide with Officer Preston, that's part of it. The other part of it is that there has been, over the last 10 years probably, a political culture about cops, and all cops are evil, which is far from the case. And you just showed a case study of our ROCKS team on what they're doing for homeless.
Sure.
So.
And partly that's some of our fault. Sometimes we don't get that message out and say, hey, look at the other things that we can be doing, because the people that we have to recruit now, and I tell this to my staff all the time, I says, hey, we got to keep the jersey on these people. They all have a bag packed and they'll go. And if they need to, they'll throw on someone else's jersey really quickly. Sure. So we got to keep our jersey on. So we're working really hard to do that, and change motivation and change some of the way we're working. And it's an interesting time, to say the least, but it's challenging.
The other side too that I wanted to mention, and the chief mentioned it in his presentation, but the idea and the concept that the chief has really brought forward as it relates to the use of non-sworn personnel into the department is really adding some crucial elements to our operations. So although they're not sworn, they're really relieving some of the time and opportunities that our officers, boots on the ground, have to free them up and be able to do some of the proactive stuff that we really need in the community. So even by adding the non-sworn personnel, we've been able to do some pretty remarkable things. And if I understand correctly,